Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So a little bit of background. I taught at 4 universities, the University of Oklahoma, the University of Virginia, the Louisiana State University, and the University of Delaware. I've been affiliated with a number of departments, including geography, meteorology, environmental science, anthropology, applied economics, statistics, civil engineering, oceanography, and geology. I'm sort of a jack of all trades. What you should take home from that is that when people figure out who I am, they don't invite me back. I've also been with the federal government. I've worked with the U.S. Department of Commerce, with the U.S. Department of Justice, with the National Security Agency, which I can't tell you anything about. I've worked at the White House, and I've worked for the German government through the Deutscher Wetterdienst, which is a German weather service. For 45 years, I've been in what's called the belly of the beast. So I have seen its spleen, its stomach, its intestines. It's not a pretty sight. And my fear is that over time, I have seen students go downhill, both in quality, both in interest, both in aptitude. But I'm pleased to see that a group of students is actually interested in continuing to learn after essentially classes are over, and in particular interested to learn about biblical issues. And so this has warmed my heart a bit, and that there is some hope for the future at least. So thank you very much. I also want to apologize to the other speakers. My fear before I got here was that I would get up and start stomping on everybody's toes, and at some point one of the speakers would stand up and say, "Hey, Legates, stay in your lane." As you can probably see, I don't stay in lanes very well. I do all sorts of stuff. So I figured that, I was going to tread on toes, but I didn't realize how much. And after the presentation this morning, the excellent presentation this morning by Pastor Robbins, I almost want to turn this talk into 4 words, point to him wherever he is, and say what he just said. But hopefully the idea of hearing things from multiple viewpoints allows us to understand Scripture, understand concepts in more depth. Seeing things from one perspective gives you sort of a 2-dimensional representation. But if you see it from multiple perspectives, you can see sort of a 3rd dimension. And hopefully that's what will happen here. I also should say I am not a theologian. I am a scientist. I'm a climatologist. I don't know how you can study climate and not come across with the idea that there is a creator, there is a divine interest in how this developed. But there are those people, so I don't know how they exist, but I'm certainly not one of them. So let's see. At this point, my current affiliation is the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. How many of you have ever heard of the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation? Very good. Some of you have. We need a little bit better PR, I think. The Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation is actually housed in Colliersville, Tennessee, but that's apparently at the other end of the state, which is about 8 hours away. That's the interesting thing about this state. I used to commute from Delaware to Oklahoma, down I-40. It was 8 hours to 8 hours to Tennessee, 8 hours through Tennessee, and then 8 hours to Oklahoma. So Tennessee was the middle 8, and it's all, from my perspective, it's almost as big as Texas. But since I was at the University of Oklahoma, it's much better than Texas because we hated Texas. Let's see. The Cornwall Alliance is a consortium of scientists, of theologians, of economists who are interested in biblical economics, biblical stewardship, interested in furthering the gospel. And so hopefully some of you will join us. We have a table a table out there. Apparently we do not run in cash. Everybody else is running in cash. We run on credit card, and if we ask for donations, and there's a little QR code, just go to the QR code and you can pay what you think the book is worth, and then take it with you. I would prefer you take it with you because otherwise I have to carry it back to Delaware and somehow figure out how to get it to the other end of Tennessee. So what I want to talk to you today is about biblical principles of environmental stewardship. As I said, I'm a scientist, so I don't have the theology background, so I'm going to steal the theology from the founder of the Cornwall Alliance, Cal Beisner, who is a theologist, but I'm going to add sort of a scientific spin on it and my own take on them. There are 30 different points that he made that he then, I think, nailed to Westminster on the door. I don't think he nailed them. I think it was taped. But in any event, you should have the 30 in your packet so you can follow along as we go. The other idea, too, is that I probably won't do, well, certainly won't do them in the same order. And the reason is because I don't follow rules very well. So therefore, we're going to do them in a different order, and it's just simply to keep you awake. They are called the biblical perspective of environmental stewardship, subduing and ruling the earth to the glory of God and the benefit of our neighbors. I didn't name it because it's way too big of a name, but nevertheless, you can find it on our website, which is cornwallalliance.org. There are landmark documents that you can find, other landmark documents that we've created, but this is the one. They're written in a format that is affirm and deny. So we will say, we affirm this, and then we deny this. And so the nice thing about it is, on each of these points, it says what we believe, and then it says what we don't believe, or why we do things that are the opposite. So I think that's very useful for us. I've divided this into 3 parts. Part 1 we'll do today, the relationship between God, humans, and creation, and the mandate God gave to Adam in Genesis 1 and 2, and you can see why there's a potential overlap already. Part 2, how humans are to interact in a godly manner with the rest of creation, will be tomorrow. And I think tomorrow night, I believe, it's part 3, the interaction between human activities and policies, environmental stewardship, and the poor. So let's begin with part 1, which is the relationship between God, humans, and the creation, and the mandate given by God to Adam in Genesis. The first question we want to address: what are the guiding principles to get us here? I mean, if we're going to have 30 points, where do they come from? Did I make them up? Did Cal make them up? What is the underlying principle? And if you'll turn with me, our underlying principles actually are Matthew 22. And if you remember Matthew 22, Jesus is in the temple. And he's talking to Sadducees, and eventually that ends, and they leave. And then come the Pharisees. The Pharisees are well-versed in the law. That's what they're known for. They're the lawyers of their day, if you want to think of it. But remember, who wrote the law? Jesus. So you have people that know the law real well talking to the person that created the law. So this ought to be good. So the first Pharisee says, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Which one's best? Which one's most important? And you get the idea that we're going to start some sort of, itemization. Well, commandments 1, 2, and 3 are immutable. By the time you get to 9 and 10, they're just really good suggestions. No, that's not where Christ went. The idea was, he said, look, you know the law, I know the law. All of the law can be summarized with just 2 commandments. Put God first, and treat everyone else as equal. The whole law is simple as that. As he said, to him you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Upon these 2 commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. Matthew 22, 36 to 40. So that will be the guiding principle. In biblical principle, a perspective of environmental stewardship will be based on Matthew 22. Whatever we do will be for the glory of God and the benefit of other humans on the planet. So we start with number 1. We affirm that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And that's essentially taking directly out of Psalm 24, 1 to 2, more correctly, Psalm 24, 1a. The earth is the Lord's and all it contains. We deny that the earth or anything else is the result of impersonal, blind chance over time. Now see, I taught statistics at 3 universities, and In environmental statistics, one of the first things I always said was, you think that after we finish this course, what you're going to be able to do is go to Atlantic City, you're going to Las Vegas, you're going to the Bristol casinos, and you're going to clean house. What you're actually going to find out is you're never going to go to any of those places again to play cards, to play roulette, to play whatever game you play. Why? They stay in business for one reason. They stack the game against you. That's what you'll learn, is that you cannot win. The longer you play, the better guarantee there is that you'll go home broke. That's the game. Now the question, why is that? Because the way the game is played, it runs downhill. It takes your money, and at the end, you wind up with nothing. The world worked the same way. In Genesis 1, we started off with, as Pastor Robbins said, nothing. Literally nothing. When it was created, it then became chaos, and God spent time organizing and ordering everything. And it was simply as a result of his word that it came into being, and simply as a result of his word that we went to order. We started off with things simple. We divided day and night. We divided land and sea. He divided land and sea. And so as a result, Genesis 1 went from nothing and chaos to order, created solely by God's word. How does the world really work? Well, the second law of thermodynamics, egads, we're doing science already and it's 10 minutes in. I apologize. Any event, order goes to chaos. Right down the road here, there's a NASCAR track in North Wilkesboro. It hadn't been used in over 20 years. What do you think the track looked like? It was in a complete state of disrepair. They had to spend lots of time, energy, and money to fix it up. Over time, anything left to its own device deteriorates, runs downhill, falls away, becomes more chaotic. That's why, essentially, we are going to be commanded to take chaos and convert it to order. Point 2, we affirm that the Bible, 66 books of the Old and New Testaments, is the sole, absolute, inerrant epistemological basis for mankind for all knowledge of all things seen and unseen, and that all claims of truth and moral duty that contradict it are false and harmful. We deny that the physical universe and human observations of it justify truth claims contrary to those of the Bible, and that liberty, justice, and human dignity can be sustained while rejecting biblical truth and law. As John Adams said, the Christian religion is, above all the religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. He also said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. If we realize why we're having trouble in the world today, particularly in the United States, it's because we've fallen away from being a truly religious people focused on God. If you understand why certain countries never really developed fully, it was because they didn't base their society on godly principles. Point 3, we affirm that the only true eternal God revealed himself in creation. Again, creation made from nothing. So he reveals himself in creation, in the Bible, and through his one and only Son, Jesus Christ. And though God reveals his wisdom and power in the creation, he is, always has been, and always will be distinct from and transcendent over creation, which he rules at all times and in all places. How many people are familiar with Peter Jones? Peter Jones is an interesting guy. He grew up in Liverpool, and he had a friend of his that he taught how to play guitar. And the two of them had gotten a gig, I guess, at a nightclub. And Peter Jones went to his mother and said, "Hey, we're going to play guitar at the nightclub." And she said, "No, you're not. No good Christian son of mine is going to be seen at a nightclub at night. You're going to stay home here." His friend, of course, was John Lennon, and he had taught John Lennon how to play guitar. He could have been a Beatle. Instead, he became an ambassador for God, which is much higher. But he's written a number of books. One of them is One or Two. Are you a oneist or are you a twoist? If you're a Christian, you're a twoist. Well, what's that mean? In other words, One or Two is looking at, is there a distinction between the Creator and creation? In some religions, there is no distinction. The Creator is seen through the creation. The creation is God in a sense. All of them are interacting. That's oneism. But in Christianity, we have the Creator and the creature, if you will, or the Creator and creation. They are separate and distinct. And I won't say never the twain shall meet, because even though the creation can never go to the Creator, the Creator can and did go from the Creator to the creation. So it is a one-way street, but it's twoism in Christianity, not oneism. So we deny that atheism, pantheism, panentheism, animism, or any other view that denies the creator-creature distinction. Because anyone who holds them exchanges the truth about God for a lie and worship and serves the creature rather than the creator who is blessed forever. Number 4, we affirm that human dignity, freedom, and justice can be sustained only insofar as a society affirms this creator-creature distinction and embraces the truth of Scripture. And those who deny it become futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts are darkened. Romans 1:21 says, "For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their reasonings, and their senseless hearts were darkened." We deny that society is built on atheism, pantheism, panentheism, animism, spiritism, or any other rejection of the creator-creature distinction. We deny that it can flourish intellectually, morally, aesthetically, and materially. It is doomed to failure because it's got God wrong from the foundation. Number 5, we affirm that the creation includes persons, conscious spirits capable of reason, moral judgment, and affection, and therefore are morally accountable for their actions. Some of these persons are bodiless, for example, angels and demons, and some are embodied, for example, humans. The issue here is that not everything in creation is a person. Back in 1966, Walt Disney Productions wanted to create a resort in the Mineral King Valley of California. It wound up in a long court battle between environmentalists and Disney, including the Sierra Club. And eventually it ended with Disney not being able to produce what they wanted. That led to essentially this book called Should Trees Have Standing, written by Christopher Stone. Now, what do you mean by standing? If you understand legal terms, standing means you have a stake in the case that you brought. If someone trashes your car, I can't sue them. Not my car, I'm not harmed. You could sue them because you are harmed, but I'm not. So the argument here was, should trees have standing? Should trees be allowed to sue? Should trees be allowed to be adjusted for being aggrieved? Now, you've never heard this story, I'm sure. At the request of the Swiss government, an ethics panel decided that essentially, sorry, I've lost the control. That ethics panel, the Committee on Non-Human Biotechnology, said essentially that we cannot destroy flora. As I said, you've never heard of it, of course you did. He just mentioned it not more than a couple hours ago. So this is why I can't change these things. But in any event, one of the interesting things is they gave an example. And the example they gave was, assume you've got a farmer. And the farmer comes home from mowing the field of hay. Well, wait a minute. What gave the farmer the right to mow the field of hay? They don't say. That seems to be okay. I'm not sure why. whether he's feeding it to his animals, and that's okay. But he's killed this whole field of hay. That's okay. But on his way home, he takes his scythe and literally, as he said, he decapitates a bunch of flowers. That's a moral agreement against those flowers which had the right to exist. Now, think about this for a moment. Yesterday was Memorial Day. Many people cut flowers and put them on the graves of their loved ones. Why? To honor their loved ones, honor people that were fallen in battle. Do you view that as being essentially a moral outrage? Why did they get permission from those flowers before they were cut? This is where we're headed. This is where, not we're headed, but where Switzerland was headed. Well, by 2014, it wasn't just flowers. It was animal life. Chimpanzees and even non-primates were involved. And in 2021, here's an article in Inside Climate News. Does nature have rights? A burgeoning legal movement says rivers, forests, and wildlife has standings too. Wait a minute. Okay, forests, wildlife, still life. Rivers? Mountains? Why should they be treated the same? Aren't they? Gets worse. Here's an article later in 2021, same Inside Climate News. International lawyers, environmentalists, and a growing number of world leaders say ecocide, the widespread destruction of the environment, would serve as a moral red line for the planet. If you can read the words down here, it starts off, in 1948, after Nazi Germany exterminated millions of Jews and other minorities during World War II. We're equating ecocide with genocide of the Nazis. Really? Wow. You got to love academics. No, I can't say that. I don't love them. They're idiots. But in any event, they do goofy stuff. So here is February of 2022, just over a year ago. The idea that everything from spoons to stones is conscious is gaining academic credibility. Did you ask this morning when you ate your cereal whether that spoon would like to be used to help you eat your cereal? I bet you didn't. You should have. This gets ridiculous. In particular, The Lancet. This is a well-respected medical journal. They talk about something called One Health, which is where, through the World Health Organization, it's an integrated, unifying approach to balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and the environment, all considered together. So, number 5 says, we deny that the material cosmos, nature and its parts, the created world of time and space, matter and energy, planets and stars, energy and material elements, is personal, either in its whole or in its parts. Hence, we deny that inanimate objects and animals are persons. We've made the distinction between creator and creature, or creator and, creation. But when we start to look at creation, we're going to make a distinction there too. Not all creation is created equal. And so we have to order some of those, and that's why we deny, essentially, that inanimate objects and animals, and I should add, or he should have added, and plants are indeed persons. We affirm, number 6, we affirm that God made man and male and female in his own image. I would have guessed that by the end of this conference, you should probably have Genesis 1, 26 to 28 probably memorized. You will see it lots of times from me, and I'm pretty sure you're going to see it lots of times from others. Let us make mankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the livestock and so forth, because I'll read it again numerous times. We deny that any other terrestrial life form bears the image of God or is of equal value or priority with human beings. Matthew 10, 29 to 31, as we also heard earlier, are 2 sparrows not sold for a copper coin? And yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. Does God care about all of creation? Certainly. But he cares about us more. So even from God's standpoint, we are worth more than a great number of sparrows. So God orders us differently than different parts of the creation. You're probably familiar with Al Gore's first magnum opus, Earth in the Balance. It came out in June of 1992. Wow, that's, 31 years from now. Wow. Last year, there was another anthology came out, The Fragile Earth, from New Yorker. And essentially, they both say the same thing. The Earth is balanced precariously, and we're headed near something they call tipping point. What's a tipping point? Well, imagine if I don't see anything. Imagine if I've got a cedar wardrobe standing here, something that's tall and narrow, and I start to push on it. It'll tilt, but at some point, if I tilt it just too far, it's going to fall over. The argument is that's what's going to happen to the climate system. We're pushing it by putting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and at some point we're going to push it so far that it's going to fall over and the climate's going to run away. We'll talk more about whether or not that's the case, but here the weird thing is 73% of people in developed countries think that this is going to happen, that we are near a climate tipping point. 73%. Here's an article in the Gazette Times, when climate tipping points tip climate tipping points. We're playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets in the gun, says Steven Singer. But 2 weeks earlier, we'd already found out that we have actually reached the climate tipping point, and now we have to take draconian measures to tip it all back. So, number 8. We affirm that the earth and all its physical and biological systems are the effects of God's omniscient design, omnipotent creation, and his faithful sustaining, and that when God completed his creative work, it was very good. And that's Genesis 1:31, and God saw it made, and behold, it was very good. We deny, though, that an infinitely wise designer, infinitely powerful creator, and perfectly faithful sustainer of the earth would have made it susceptible to catastrophic degradation from proportionally small causes. And consequently, we deny that wise environmental stewardship readily embraces claims of catastrophe that stem from such causes. We affirm that this is number 9, we affirm that by God's design, earth and its physical and biological systems are robust, resilient, and self-correcting. There's a little neat example we do in climate class. It's called Daisy World. It's a world in which life exists only in the form of daisies, and there's only 2 types. They're exactly the same, except one is dark and one is white. So you have black daisies and you have white daisies. And you run the planet simulation, and with just basic simulation assumptions on how life would grow, what you get is if the planet starts to warm too much, the black daisies die off, the white daisies live, and the planet cools. On the other hand, if it gets too cold, the white daisies die off, the black daisies grow, and the planet warms. Now, clearly the Earth doesn't warm and cool that way, but we actually believe that it may warm and cool by the clouds, and that's something called the infrared iris effect that Dick Lindzen at MIT came up with. Very simply put, what happens is as the Earth warms, you get more vertical motion, you get more cloud cover, it reflects off the incoming sunlight, and the temperature decreases. And when the temperature decreases, these vertical motion of clouds go away, the Earth essentially closes, we get more sunlight comes through, it warms the surface, and it's a moderating effect. In climate system, there are lots of these, what we call negative feedbacks. The Earth gets warm, something happens, and it cools back down. I don't think that happens by happenstance. I'm pretty sure that is intelligent design built into it. So we deny, then, from number 9, that physical and biological systems are fragile. Now, as I said, maybe I didn't say, I recently retired from the University of Delaware. I managed to make everybody there hate me. And it's largely from being a climate change skeptic, denier is a pejorative, a climate change skeptic, and from being a, dare I say it, a Christian. So here we see the Delaware UD Review, Green Dragon Slayer for hire in a geography department near you. Gee, I wonder who they could be talking about. Let's see, Taylor Nguyen writes, to find religious justification for their activity, Christian anti-environmentalists and groups such as the Cornwall Alliance claim a specific literal interpretation of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, in case you didn't know, apparently. Finding free market justification in passages that describe God giving humans unrestricted reign over earth. According to the interpretation, God granted humans dominion over the planet and the license to exert power over the earth's resources. From here, environmentalist attempts to regulate fossil fuel use, for instance, stand contrary to man's God-given destiny. I talked to the chair of the department, who's a devout Muslim, and he said, you know, if this kind of stuff had happened with me, the Muslim community would be up in arms. Nobody from the Christian community ever said a word. So I went to the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, not because I expected her to do anything. I just wanted to see what she'd tell me. So after a while, a bit, she said to me, well, you know, I'm a Christian, and I think Christians should be loved by everybody. So if these people don't like you, you must figure out what you've done against them and apologize. I'm moving into a new house. On one of the walls, I'm going to have a little plaque. It's essentially God talking, and he says, you saw what they did to my son. Did you think they'd treat you any better? In any event, I'm going to ask the question, and you've probably heard this before, and not from somebody you'd think I'd be citing. Did God really say all this? Well, let's ask the question, is that what God said? All right. So we go back to Genesis 1:26 to 28 yet again. God said, let us make mankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the livestock and over all the earth. God said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and so forth. Now the question is that the correct interpretation of Hebrew? Rule over and subdue. I don't speak Hebrew, so I don't know, but I need a theologian. And Cal, in one of his books, which you might be able to get out there, I think, said yes. Subdue translates the Hebrew kabosh. You ever heard the phrase, put the kibosh on that? Yeah, it's essentially the word that's being used. It means to subdue, to bring into bondage from a primitive root, meaning to tread down or to beat down, to make a path or press or squeeze or knead or to attack or assault. Rule translates radah, to have dominion, chastise, tread, trample, or prevail against. So did God say that? Yeah. Does that mean we can rule with an iron fist? Well, no. We're to rule over, but remember, we're still under the constraint of Matthew 22. Anything we do must be to the glory of God and to the benefit of others. That's the game, that's the game we're playing. Okay, so those are the rules. You can't go in and burn everything up. You can't, as I say, you can't burn it all down because that will neither glorify God nor help others. So we can't act as a rogue dictator, but we're supposed to rule over to the point that whatever we do is for the glory of God and the benefit of others. So number 7, we affirm that though the earth is the Lord's, he has also given it to men and mandated that they be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over everything that lives in it. And I won't go back to Genesis 1:28. This time I'll go to Psalm 115:16, where it says, the heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth he has given to the sons of mankind. We deny that human dominion over the earth is in principle sinful, and that the possibility of its abuse negates the righteousness of its proper use. Number 10, we affirm that godly human dominion over the earth means men and women created in the image of God are laboring freely and lovingly together to enhance Earth's safety, fruitfulness, and beauty to the glory of God and to the benefit of our neighbors. We deny that godly human dominion entails humans being servants rather than masters of the earth. we are told to have dominion over. That does not sound like being a servant. That sounds like being a master. But again, it's under the constraint of Matthew 22. We are to do so for the glory of God and the benefit of other humans. Number 11, we affirm that when God created Adam, he placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and guard it. And we deny that the Garden of Eden represents the whole earth, and that the instruction to cultivate and guard the garden must be reinterpreted to mean either that man is to protect and serve, or to worship and protect the garden or the earth, or that man is to worship and hear God either directly through the earth or its parts. So let's recap. What we see here is God said, let us make mankind in our image. So God builds, effectively, the world, and then has us buy in. What happened in terms of naming things? God starts off by saying he named light day and the night, darkness night. He put the sun to rule the day and the earth to rule the night. God is going through and naming everything. Then he gets to beings. And what's he do? The animals are left unnamed. He goes to Adam and says, brings them one at a time and says, you name them. You're going to be ruling over these. You're not ruling over the planets. You're not ruling over the sun or the moon. I've already named that. But you're going to be ruling over these things. And as a buy-in, you're going to name them. You can't create them. I'm the only creator, meaning God. So you can't create them, but you can name them. And if you're naming them, that puts you in control of them. And that's the buy-in. And I've gotten way ahead of myself, of course. But you can see God called the light day and so forth. So he's naming things. And then he formed the beings of the field. And so in this case, the garden. The issue is, what is not Eden? Or was there a not Eden? Was Eden the entire globe? Well, no, because it says Eden was specifically in a place. So what was not Eden? It's chaos. It's uncontrolled land. Well, what does chaos look like? It's wilderness. There's, well, not necessarily nothing there, but there is life. But the life is not life you can live with. And so that is how we define sort of the wilderness. So number 13 says, we affirm that the Bible normally associates wilderness or wildness with judgment and curse. For example, in Exodus 23:29, or we can look at Deuteronomy 7:22, both of them says, look, I'm not going to drive everybody out in one move. You won't be able to take over all the land, and so as a result, the wilderness is going to take over, and that's going to be worse than the people I'm driving out. So what I'm going to do is drive them out piecemeal. And as I do, you will then occupy the land, so that the wilderness can't take over. Leviticus 16:21. Aaron, as is in his priestly duty, essentially says, lays both hands on the head of the live goat. The sins of Israel are placed on the goat, and then what happens to the goat? It's driven out into the wilderness. So the wilderness is the place where the sin was sent in the Aaron priestly regime. Leviticus 26:21-22. If you show hostility towards me and are willing to obey me, I will also let loose among you the animals of the field, which will deprive you of children, eliminate your cattle, and reduce your numbers so that your roads become deserted. Having the wilderness invade is a punishment. 1 Samuel, same thing, the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines, to the birds of the sky, the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And Jeremiah 50:39, therefore the desert creatures will live there with the jackals, and the ostriches will live in it, but it will never be inhabited. It will be wilderness. So wilderness is a place you don't want to be. It is not Eden. It is divine judgment and curse. We deny that wilderness is the best state for the earth to be in. Now, that sounds, well, that makes sense until you start to listen to what a lot of people are telling you. We want wilderness. That's a good thing. See, I was in Oklahoma for a decade, and I remember during the early 90s, there was a lot of discussion of something called the Buffalo Commons. Anybody heard of Buffalo Commons? The idea was that the federal government should start buying land. And when land became available, they would buy the land, they would remove any human activity from it, and let it sit fallow, and eventually they'd own large swaths of land in Oklahoma where the buffalo could roam freely. Is that really what we want? To destroy civilization in places so that the wilderness can come back? We deny that wilderness is the best state of the earth. I think I'm about out of time, so let me go say that part 2, we will resume tomorrow morning, I think, and then part 3 will be tomorrow night, and then I'll probably do some sciencey stuff on Thursday and Friday. Thank you.